Usually, when we talk about diagnosing a really complex system, there is this sort of comforting expectation of precision.
Right, yeah.
Like you break a bone, you get an X-ray, and the doctor just points to that jagged white line on the screen. It's broken or it's not broken. It's a completely binary, visible reality.
It's right there in front of you.
Exactly. But when you look at the digital nervous system of our modern world, that X-ray machine is entirely useless. The diagnostic landscape we're navigating today is just incredibly murky, mostly because the real threats, well, they're structural and completely invisible.
I mean, we really create categorization. We want to see the problem clearly. But the vulnerabilities in our digital infrastructure, they just don't show up on a neat little scan. They hide in the spaces between systems, in those operational blind spots, and honestly, in the sheer massive scale of the networks we've built.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really massive update that dropped on April 20th, 2026 from Kinsoft.
Yeah, the Tech Talks briefing.
Right, their Tech Talks briefing titled Vulnerabilities, Breaches, and AI Shifts. And our mission today is to basically take what looks like a rapid-fire tech news roundup and slow it right down. We want to extract the hidden patterns for you.
Which is so needed right now.
It really is. We are going to connect the dots between microscopic flaws in our code, the structural vulnerabilities of corporate supply chains, some massive labor restructuring, and the escalating battle for global space infrastructure.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Think of a digital matrix, right? Just morphing into a global map of data streams. Keep that visual in your mind as we go through this, because these Kinsoft headlines aren't just isolated, IT department headaches.
Not at all.
No, they represent these seismic shifts in how modern society operates. And really, the most logical place to begin understanding this shift is at the absolute microscopic level, the literal code that runs the economy.
Yeah, let's start there, because Microsoft's recent Patch Tuesday included an absolute avalanche of fixes. I mean, 167 in total.
That is a staggering number. It's wild. And buried in that massive pile were two incredibly dangerous 0 days. I mean, dealing with 167 vulnerabilities is sort of like managing security for a massive 100-story skyscraper and suddenly realizing, 167 windows were left unlocked.
Right, a complete logistical nightmare.
Exactly. It's a nightmare to send teams to secure them all, but a 0 day that is actively exploited. That means a burglar already has the master key and is currently inside the building, just walking the halls.
What's fascinating here is how the concept of triage becomes so critical. An enterprise environment is just, well, it's simply too complex to patch simultaneously without breaking essential services.
You just take the whole system down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So security teams have to prioritize based on the potential blast radius. And Kinsoft highlights that one of these 0 days was an actively exploited flaw in SharePoint server, which actually made the U.S. government's official must-patch list. Yeah, think about the gravity of that for a second. A federal government intervening directly in corporate software maintenance. SharePoint isn't just some basic document viewer. It is the collaborative backbone for defense contractors, infrastructure operators, massive multinational corporations.
Right. It's the central nervous system for internal strategic data.
Precisely. So when the government throws up a flare like a must-patch mandate for SharePoint, it signals a massive systemic risk. Hackers aren't just looking to, deface public-facing websites anymore.
Yeah, not the good stuff.
Right. They are embedded in the digital filing cabinets where the actual strategic proprietary work happens. They're basically establishing a beachhead for lateral movement across the entire network.
And the second 0-day Kinsoft flags makes that lateral movement even more terrifying, to be honest. It's a publicly disclosed Windows Defender privilege escalation bug.
Yeah, that one is rough.
Because Windows Defender is the literal security guard of the operating system. So privilege escalation basically means a low-level intruder, maybe just some basic malware that got executed by a careless email click, figures out how to manipulate system memory to grant itself administrative rights.
Right. So the malware goes from having guest access in the lobby to literally holding the keys to the server room.
Exactly.
It alters its own identity within the operating system's hierarchy. I mean, the sheer fragility of these systems is just staggering when you really look at it. We tend to assume enterprise code is solid architecture, like poured concrete.
Yeah, we want it to be.
But in reality, it is highly porous and requires this frantic, continuous maintenance just to keep the roof from caving in on a daily basis.
But the thing is, and the Kinsoft briefing makes this really clear, flawless code doesn't actually solve the problem.
No, it doesn't.
You can lock all 167 windows, you can patch your servers, secure your endpoints, build a literal fortress. It means absolutely nothing if your internal architecture automatically unlocks the doors for a compromised partner.
The supply chain issue.
Exactly. The briefing details a massive breach at Rockstar Games by the Shiny Hunters crew. And the wild part is, the attackers didn't breach Rockstar's heavily fortified perimeter directly. They slipped in through a third-party vendor.
Yeah, Rockstar's internal walls held up perfectly fine, but their supply chain crumbled. Kinsoft notes the attackers leaked internal data, though they reportedly didn't reach the core game source code or the most sensitive player databases.
Right.
But their conclusion is pretty blunt. The supply chain is the ultimate soft spot.
Okay, wait. I need to stop you there for a second.
Sure.
Because if the highly valuable game source code is totally safe and the player data wasn't even touched, who cares? I mean, isn't this just an embarrassing PR headache over some leaked Slack messages or internal emails? Why is this a major structural warning for the rest of us?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it matters entirely because of the methodology it proves. Modern corporate entities aren't walled castles anymore.
They're too big for that.
Right. They are interconnected ecosystems, heavily reliant on dozens of external vendors for everything, marketing analytics, HR platforms, you name it. And to make those vendor relationships functional, you have to connect your digital systems via APIs and network authentication tokens.
Which means you are establishing automated, trusted pipelines between your secure network and theirs.
Exactly. You are giving external applications permission to read and write data inside your fortress. So when Shiny Hunters compromised that third-party vendor, they proved they could navigate that trusted pipeline.
Wow.
It's basically like giving your external accounting firm a digital key card that is programmed to only open the specific financial filing room. But because the building's internal API architecture uses these interconnected trust protocols, once the attacker is inside, using the accountant's key card, they can often manipulate those permissions to just wander into adjacent restricted areas.
That is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, the fact that he didn't hit the source code this time is likely just a matter of timing or specific network segmentation, not a failure of the attack vector itself. The door is propped open.
So you are only as secure as the absolute weakest vendor you do business with.
Exactly.
Which makes auditing your own security posture feel almost impossible. You have to somehow audit the security practices of every single partner in your supply chain, which mathematically just doesn't scale for a modern enterprise.
And hackers understand this math perfectly. They are actively avoiding the heavily fortified front doors of the main enterprise targets. It is far more efficient to quietly slip through the API side doors of smaller, less secure vendors who hold legitimate access tokens.
It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. It forces a complete paradigm shift in cybersecurity. A company is an ecosystem, and any introduced pathogen anywhere in that ecosystem threatens the entire host.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That structural vulnerability isn't limited to software APIs and vendor ecosystems. The human layer itself is increasingly viewed as a weakness to be optimized out.
Yes, the labor shift.
Right. The Kinsoft briefing highlights Snap announcing a cut of around 1,000 jobs. And for context, that is roughly a sixth of their entire workforce. And the explicitly credited reason for this massive amputation, AI efficiencies.
And the market reaction to that was immediate and highly revealing.
The stock jumped.
It did. Kinsoft points out this is a very familiar pattern right now across the sector. AI is the headline justification for both massive capital expenditure and aggressive employee layoffs.
The paradox here is just staggering to me. I mean, executives are actively bleeding cash on the balance sheet to acquire or build these AI systems, and Wall Street is literally cheering them on for shedding human jobs. They're spending billions of dollars to save money.
This raises an important question about market mechanics. To understand the drive here, you have to look at how financial markets value human labor versus technological infrastructure. Humans are operational expenses, OPEX.
Right, the day-to-day costs.
Exactly. They require healthcare, they experience burnout, they need management, and, they sleep. From a cold ledger perspective, human capital is a heavy recurring liability that scales linearly. If you want twice the localized output, you generally need to hire twice the humans.
But AI is treated differently. It's treated as a capital expenditure CapEx. It is an infrastructure investment.
Spot on. You train the model or buy the enterprise license once, and the marginal cost of having that algorithm do the work of 1,000 people approaches zero over time.
which Wall Street loves.
Oh, they love it. When Snap announces they are achieving AI efficiencies, they are signaling to the market that they can maintain or grow their operational output while permanently amputating a massive chunk of their recurring liabilities. The algorithm is perceived as infinitely scalable, operating 24/7 without benefits or HR disputes.
And we aren't just talking about abstract efficiencies in a boardroom here. We're talking about automating very specific workflows, QA testing, first-tier customer support triage, basic code generation, the very systems we were just talking about patching and securing earlier.
Exactly, the actual heavy lifting.
The modern workforce is caught in a brutal pincer movement. Rapid capability gains in AI are making it genuinely useful for everyday corporate tasks, while the financial market actively incentivizes companies to prioritize that algorithmic technology over human employment.
It really is a massive economic realignment. I mean, the long-term sustainability of a consumer economy that systematically reduces its human workforce is highly questionable. Who buys the products if a sixth of the workforce is optimized out?
Right, it doesn't make long-term sense.
But the short-term market pattern is firmly locked in. Algorithmic efficiency equals higher future profit margins, which equals higher stock prices today, regardless of the localized human tool.
So to power all these AI efficiencies and to maintain these global API-driven vendor supply chains we talked about, these tech giants need absolute dominance over data transmission. They require zero latency and zero disruption.
Absolutely zero.
And to guarantee that, they're basically abandoning the terrestrial sphere entirely. Which brings us to the final piece of the Kinsoft briefing, the board game in the sky.
Yeah, they are moving the core infrastructure into low Earth orbit.
It's wild. The update details Amazon making a staggering $11.5 billion bid to acquire the satellite operator Globalstar. Their goal is to bulk up a direct rival to Starlink. It's almost like a game of Monopoly, but instead of buying Boardwalk and Park Place, we're watching tech giants buy up orbital space to control the literal pipes of the global internet.
It really is. And if you synthesize everything we've analyzed today, the microscopic code flaws, the vulnerable supply chains, the massive AI infrastructure investments, the strategic logic behind an $11.5 billion space acquisition becomes incredibly clear.
How so?
Well, terrestrial infrastructure is just an absolute mess of vulnerabilities. Undersea fiber optic cables are exposed to everything from accidental anchor drags to state-sponsored sabotage. Local data centers are subject to regional power grid failures. But more importantly, earthbound infrastructure is subject to geopolitics.
Physical borders. Because if you run a fiber optic cable through a sovereign country, you have to obey that country's laws, their telecommunications regulators, and, their national firewalls.
Exactly. Amazon's entire empire, from retail logistics to AWS cloud computing to the massive AI infrastructure driving their stock price, relies on constant, unbroken data flow.
Right.
The ultimate structural vulnerability is relying on someone else's physical infrastructure, especially when that infrastructure is heavily regulated by varying nation-states with shifting political alliances.
Because if you don't own the physical pipes, the local government can just shut off the water.
Yeah.
Or they can intercept and monitor the flow.
Exactly. So by spending $11.5 billion on a satellite network, Amazon is bypassing the chaotic, vulnerable earthbound networks entirely. Owning the satellites means you own the transmission from space directly to the ground hardware entirely on your own terms. It effectively bypasses physical terrestrial borders.
They are basically building a private, closed-loop orbital nervous system. They don't have to worry about a compromised local ISP in their supply chain or some foreign government cutting a cable in a territorial dispute. They just beam the data straight down from their own hardware in orbit.
Precisely.
It kind of elevates these tech giants into something resembling digital nation-states. They're no longer beholden to the physical geography of the countries they actually operate in.
And by building a rival to Starlink, Amazon is ensuring no single private entity holds a monopoly on that space-based sovereignty. This is the modern space race. It is not nations competing over geopolitical ideology anymore.
Wow.
It is mega corporations competing for absolute data supremacy and infrastructure independence.
The scale of this transition is genuinely dizzying. So what does this all mean for you listening at home? Let's quickly recap the terrain we've covered today. In just one Kinsoft briefing, we've traced a complete spectrum of systemic restructuring.
We really have.
We started at the microscopic level, looking at how 167 patches and actively exploited 0 days in SharePoint and Defender highlight the utter fragility of the foundational code our economy relies on.
Then we zoomed out to see how Rockstar's API vendor breach proves our interconnected corporate ecosystems are incredibly porous. You really are only as secure as the external vendor holding the digital keycard to your network.
Right. And from there, we looked at the human layer, analyzing the brutal financial logic behind Snap's AI layoffs, where companies are bleeding capital to build algorithms that simply erase human operational expenses.
Yeah.
And finally, we looked up seeing Amazon deploy $11.5 billion into low Earth orbit to bypass terrestrial infrastructure and achieve true borderless data sovereignty.
The Kinsoft update ends with a really simple, vital piece of advice. Stay patched, stay skeptical. It's a reminder to examine your own digital footprint, your professional supply chains, and your reliance on external systems with a highly critical eye.
Definitely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We've seen how AI efficiencies are restructuring the economic value of human labor, and how megacorporations are deploying satellite networks to bypass the physical borders and infrastructure of traditional nation-states.
Right. Which brings up the ultimate question moving forward, one of governance. As these shifts accelerate, who actually writes the laws of our future digital society?
That is the million-dollar question.
Exactly. If the labor force is managed by algorithmic efficiency, and the data flows through privately owned orbital streams, will our lives really be guided by the earthbound governments issuing those must-patch lists? Or will the true power lie with the private, borderless megacorporations that own the AI, the supply chains, and the stars themselves?
It's a lot to think about. We keep looking for that clean X-ray, a simple binary picture of how our world works and who is actually in charge of it. But the deeper we dive into the code and the orbital networks, the more we realize those old diagnostic tools are completely useless.
Yeah, they really are.
The picture is murky, the systems are fragile, and honestly, the only way forward is to keep asking the hard questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and we'll see you next time.